Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, my name's Jenny and this is Arnold the Praying Penguin, and we create videos every Saturday about prayer, about exploring the Bible and about living out your faith. And today we're going to be talking about the 25 books that I want to read before my 25th birthday. Now my birthday is the same day as Dorky's birthday, so he's going to take on this challenge with me and see if we can read all 25 of these books before I turn 25. I am currently 23 years old, so I have about 21 months to complete this challenge. So we have 25 books, we've separated them into categories. We've got series that we want to finish, Christian books, non-fiction books, historical fiction, and everything else, which is mostly kind of contemporary stuff. Now, some of these books are books that I already own, that are already on my shelves. Some of them I don't currently own, but lots of them are available on Libby, which is the app my library uses for ebooks and audiobooks. So I should be able to read all of them. They should all be accessible to me. I will link all of the books that I mention down in the description, so you can go down there and check them out if any of them sound appealing to you as well. There's a real mixture here of books I think are going to be that I'm going to really love, and books I think are going to be really important to read, cover really interesting topics or really hard-hitting topics. So there's a whole combo mixed together, and me and Arnold are excited to share these books with all of you guys. So my first category of books is series that I want to finish. So I've already started all of these series and I just want to get to the end of them before I turn 25, because if I've started the series now and it takes me till after I'm 25, I'm probably going to have forgotten these first ones anyway, so I need to read them reasonably quickly. So the first series that I want to finish is the Athena Club series. So this series is by Theodora Goss and it starts with The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter. The second book is European Travel for the Monstrous Gentlewoman, which I read in March on audiobook and also loved it. Both of these have had 5 stars so far. And then the final book that I need to read is The Sinister Mystery of the Mesmerising Girl, which is actually on my April TBR. The Penguins chose that for me. If you're not familiar with my Penguins Choose My TBR game, I will link that down in the description and you can go in and check those out as well. But the Penguins choose what books I'm going to read for the month. So hopefully I will have finished this series by the end of April, so we're off to a good start. The second series that I want to finish is the Promise Falls series. Now this is a kind of mystery thriller series, and Broken Promise is the first one. Then we have Far From True and The 23 are the main trilogy. So it is billed as the Promise Falls trilogy. But I was looking on Goodreads the other day when I was looking at this, and there is a book 4, which is called Parting Shot. So I don't know if that was just like added on after. I'm not quite sure how that's like connected to the trilogy. But there's also 1.5, which I had never heard of. I can't remember what that's called. I'll put it on the screen. So there's 5 books in this series now, and I've only read 1. So this one is a bit more of a challenge. But Linwood Barclay was kind of the first author that I kind of read that got me into kind of thrillers, kind of these more like adult mystery thrillers. And this book was really good. It was really interesting. It kind of finished up like the plot line in this story, but it did leave a lot of like hints and kind of unanswered questions that I can really see where the trilogy may go. Okay, so my second category of books are Christian books. So these are books that I think are gonna hopefully help me and my faith, strengthen my faith, and explore different topics around faith. So the first book is The Marriage Book by Nikki and Silla Lee. If you've watched my video looking at 7 things that I learnt in 3 years of marriage, you'll know that I did both the marriage prep course and the marriage course that were run by Nikki and Silla Lee, and this is their book. I'm imagining it will cover kind of some of the same stuff, but probably some extra stuff and a bit more detail in this format. I really enjoyed both of the courses, so I'm intrigued to see what is in this book. I do kind of want to leave a little bit of a break between the marriage course, which I kind of finished at the beginning of March, and reading this book, because I do think there will be some overlap. So this is maybe a next year book, but I'm excited to read it at some point. The next book is Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. This is quite an old book, but it is definitely a staple within Christian non-fiction. Everyone seems to recommend this book, everyone seems to love it. C.S. Lewis is obviously incredibly famous for writing the Chronicles of Narnia series, but also lots of other Christian non-fiction books. And from what I've heard, this is going to be a really good book for kind of looking back at the basics and building a really solid understanding of our faith, but also kind of looking at how we can answer questions about our faith as well. So I am very excited to read this. The next book in this section is It Takes a Church to Raise a Parent, which is by Rachel Turner, who is a pioneer for Parenting for Faith, which is a part of BRF, which is the Bible Reading Fellowship. And they do a lot of work supporting parents in raising children in faith. But this book is looking at how the church can support parents to raise children in faith. I think this book will be really interesting and really helpful in kind of activities that we do in church with families and with children, and helping parents to take faith home and do faith at home. Those are things that I think are really important, and even if I'm not a parent at the moment, I think it'd be really good to kind of understand better how to support other parents. The next book on my list is You're Not Enough and That's Okay by Ali Beth Stuckey. So I've listened to Ali's podcast for quite a long time, followed her on Instagram, all of those things, and really appreciated some of the things that she has to say about culture and about politics and about kind of what's going on socially as well. And this book is kind of taking a look at the culture of self-love, the self-love movement, and kind of looking at that through a biblical worldview. Actually seeing what does the self-love movement get right, what does it get wrong, and finding a better way to look at that based on a biblical perspective. So I am really excited to read this. I think it's going to be really interesting and be full of loads of really great thoughts. The next book on my list is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. Now I know not everyone would categorise this as a Christian book because it's so loved by people around the world that aren't Christians and would see no Christian element to it because it's not kind of overtly Christian. But I've categorised it here just because I first came across Charlie Mackesy for his faith and because of the art that he's done and the work that he's done as an evangelist. But yeah, loads of people have loved it. It's got his beautiful, beautiful artwork and just like little snippets, little tiny stories, little sayings that are really encouraging, really uplifting, really soothing. I know loads of people have found this book really helpful during the pandemic particularly. But yeah, I'm really excited to get my hands on that and to be able to see what is in it. The next book on my list is We Died Before We Came Here by Emily Foreman, and I believe that is not actually her name, all the names have been changed for safety purposes. So this is the story of the Foreman family who were evangelists in North Africa. And Emily's husband Stephen was actually shot and killed by Al-Qaeda operatives. And it talks about, from what I know, kind of the work that they were doing in North Africa and Stephen's legacy and making sure that he didn't die in vain, and kind of this passion that they had for evangelizing in that area. I haven't really read any books before about missionaries or missionary families, so I think this will be really, really interesting. And then the final book that I've got in my Christian book section is How to Pray by Pete Greig. Now, I've done the prayer course many times before, the old one and the new one, and I've read God on Mute by Pete Greig and really, really enjoyed that. So I'm really interested to see what's in this book. It covers lots of different types of prayer. I read one chapter in the middle, I think it was on contemplative prayer, but I'd quite like to read all of it, like start to finish, and see everything that's in here, because I think it will be a really good, simple guide for normal people. That's the tagline of this book, so I think it'd be really interesting to look at this and to see a bit more about prayer. And obviously Arnold approves of this book because he loves to pray. Okay, so my next category of books are other non-fiction books, and the first of these is Deserter by Charles Glass. And this book is kind of exploring the history of people deserting during World War II and kind of what led them to desert and what was the consequences of them deserting their posts. And I believe it covers 3 different stories of 3 different men, one in France, one in Italy, and one in North Africa, I believe. But I think it also talks more widely about why so many people did desert during World War II, and the impact of that, the impact of the war upon these people. I think this is a part of World War II history that isn't talked about very much, so I think this will be really interesting to learn more about. So the next book on my list is The Girl Who Smiled Beads by Clementine Wamaria, and this is a autobiographic account of the Rwandan genocide. Clementine was just a young girl during the beginning of the genocide and fled with her sister across Africa before eventually getting to the United States. So I think this story is going to be kind of her account of that journey of leaving Rwanda, and also of kind of their experience in the United States as well once they'd settled there. So again, the Rwandan genocide isn't something I know a lot about, in a lot of detail. I know kind of basic information, but nothing kind of more than that. So I think it'll be really interesting to hear her story and to hear what that experience was like. Again, not an easy read, and I think that's a bit of a theme in quite a lot of these non-fiction books that you'll see. They're not easy reads, but I think they're important things for us to know. History is something that I find really interesting, particularly history of kind of conflict and warfare. Not because it's fun or easy, but I think it's so interesting and fascinating and so important for us to know about and to understand the experiences that other people went through. And that carries on into the third book in this category, which is Our Bodies, Their Battlefields by Christina Lamb. And this book explores women's experiences of war in lots of different ways. I think she covers loads of different countries within this and looks at the kind of untold stories of women during wartime and what they went through, particularly how women are used in warfare, how things like rape can be used in warfare, about how girls are often abducted, and how that all kind of plays out within warfare. So again, not at all an easy read, but I think will be really interesting and really important to understand. And then the final book in this category is The Twins of Auschwitz by Eva Moses-Kor. And Eva was I believe a Romanian Jew who was taken to Auschwitz, and her twin sister Miriam were taken into the kind of medical experiments of Dr. Joseph Mengele, who did a lot of really, really horrible, really awful experiments on particularly twin children. And this is her story of what happened and of her survival in that situation. So actually all of my non-fiction books that were in that category are all historical based non-fiction. And we're going to carry on that trend and look at my next category of books, which is historical fiction. So historical fiction books were kind of what got me interested in history in the first place. I didn't actually go to university, but when I applied, I was going to study history. That's what I wanted to study at the time. I got a bit put off by A-level history, but I still love history. I still love learning about history. I still love kind of visiting historical places and kind of experiencing history in that way. And historical fiction books are a great way to do this, especially if they're really well researched, really well written books. So my first book in this category is Kololo Hill by Nima Shah, and this is a book set in 1972 Uganda, when all Ugandan Asians were given 90 days before they had to leave. And again, this is a period of history that I really don't know much about. My knowledge is definitely lacking in this area, so it'll be really interesting to hear this story in fiction form, but still kind of to learn about that experience. The next book that I want to read is Without a Country by Asa Kulin. And this book follows a family of German Jews who flee to Turkey during the Second World War, towards the beginning, and it looks at kind of their experience of leaving Germany, of going to Turkey, and their life in Turkey, where they're kind of originally welcomed, but then kind of how conflict comes in Turkey and kind of how anti-Semitism kind of rises up in Turkey as well, and their experience of that. And again, World War II is probably the period of history that I know the most about, and kind of the Holocaust. But this is looking at that experience from a different perspective. Someone that went to Turkey. I don't know much about Turkey in general and Turkey's history. So I think this kind of completely different perspective on the same war will be really interesting. The next book on my list is Dangerous Women by Hope Adams. And this, we're going a bit further back in time. All of this so far has been in quite recent history. We're going a little bit further back to 1841, when women convicts, so women prisoners, were put on a ship and sent to Australia. And I believe it's a bit of a kind of murder mystery type book when someone is killed aboard this ship, and it's kind of looking at the secrets that these women have and what they will do to survive aboard this ship. The next historical fiction book that I want to read is Homegoing by Yar Jessie. And this is a book that starts in Ghana with two sisters, or two half-sisters, and one of them is sold into slavery and one of them is married to an Englishman and kind of lives quite like a much nicer life, obviously, than that of a slave. And it kind of follows them and their children and kind of the generations after between their lives and kind of what happens to them. And I believe it follows quite a long period of time, about 300 years, of the different generations and works their way through their stories. The next book I'd like to read is A Long Petal of the Sea by Isabel Allende. And this book is looking at the Spanish Civil War, which I have never really learned about at all, but in kind of the late 30s there was the Spanish Civil War, and it looks at a family who are fleeing from that war and they flee to Chile. It's about their life there and about all of that journey and what happens to them. So again, this is an area of history that I don't know very much about, so I'd be really interested to learn more about that. So the next book on my list is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. And this is quite different to the other historical fictions on this list because it is historical because it's set in 1969, but it's not really about the history as far as I know. It's much more a bit of a mystery. There is a marsh girl who's suspected of murder when a dead body turns up, and it's a bit of a mystery of working out, did she do it, did she not do it? I think there's a bit of kind of courtroom mystery elements to it and kind of following different timelines of what happened, and you're kind of working out what happened. So it is historical fiction, but there's also kind of different elements to it as well. I don't know if kind of the history will play a big part in it or not. I have no idea. I know loads of people absolutely love this book and I've seen it recommended in so many places, so I think it's going to be really good. And then the final book in my historical fiction category is How We Disappeared by Jingjing Li. And again, this is a kind of World War II time period but set in Singapore. So as the Japanese troops invaded Malaysia and Singapore, it looks at the impact on people in that part of the world and about what happened to them. And I believe it's kind of dual timeline, so you've got back in 1942 after Japan is kind of invading Singapore, and it also has the year 2000 when a boy hears something that his grandma says and is kind of investigating what happened and what happened to his grandma. So I think this sounds absolutely fascinating. Again, I know quite a bit about the Second World War, but I have never looked that much at the experience of Singapore and Asian countries. So I think that will be really interesting. I think I've definitely said interesting like a billion times in this video, so I'm sorry if I've said it too many times. So the final category of the books that I want to read before I'm 25 is basically everything else. And this has kind of ended up being the contemporary books, because that's another area that I'm really interested in. There actually aren't that many mystery and thrillers on this list, which is interesting. I love mysteries and thrillers, but I think I don't look forward to them in the same way. I don't see them and think, that's going to be amazing. I just see whichever ones come up and then tend to enjoy them. I don't know if that makes sense, but with historical fiction especially, I see them like, that sounds amazing. I don't quite get those same feelings about mystery and thrillers. I just end up enjoying them. Does that make sense? I don't know. Anyway, these are contemporary books. So the first book in this section is Away with the Penguins by Hazel Pryor. Arnold is a big fan. It's got penguins in it. What a great book. Yeah, I want to read this because it's about penguins. It's about an old lady who goes and finds some penguins, I think. Yes, penguins. And fun fact that I need to share with you. So this font that the Away and the Penguins is in is actually the font that we used on our wedding invitations, which also had a penguin on it. So this is officially the penguin font in my mind, and that just makes me happy. Yeah, I think this is going to be a really nice, feel-good book, full of penguins. The next book that I want to read is The Travelling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arakawa. And this book is about a cat and his owner, and they go on a road trip, and it sounds amazing. This is translated from Japanese and it's set in Japan. They're travelling around Japan in the different seasons. So I'm hoping there's going to be lots of really nice descriptions of the Japanese countryside and kind of the different places that they explore and the different people that they meet. But I have heard that this is really sad, so I am a bit scared that something's going to happen to the cat and it's going to be really sad. But it does sound really good. The next book that I want to read is Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. And to be honest, I just want to read anything by Fredrik Backman. There's loads of his books that really appeal to me. So I just like to read something from him. And Anxious People is, I believe, his newest book and follows a group of people who kind of accidentally end up being held hostages in a bank robbery gone wrong, which sounds really funny and interesting to start with. But I think it's a real character study, looking at these different people and what's going on in their lives as well. Another book that I'd like to read is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. And I think this is going to be a really hard-hitting book. It follows a girl who was 15 and she had a relationship with her English teacher, and then many years later it's kind of coming out that he's being accused of abuse by other girls who were students of his. And this girl was really surprised because she didn't see it as abuse at the time. She saw it as a proper relationship. So it's kind of her coming to terms with that, deciding what to do about that, I think, and kind of exploring that. And I think this is a really important topic, looking at abuse and grooming and some of those really hard-hitting topics that can be really hard to understand. And then the final book on my list, my 25th book that I would like to read before I'm 25, is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Now, I've read Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig and really enjoyed that, found it really easy to read but also really helpful. And this is a book that's kind of looking at mental health, and it takes place in a library between life and death, where the girl who's there is able to look at these different books, and each book is basically what would have happened had she made a different decision in her life. So she can look at things that she regrets and see, oh, what would have happened if you made a different decision? This is what your life would have looked like instead. So I think it sounds really interesting. I think it's going to be a lot about regret and mental health and all of that kind of area. So I think it's going to be really interesting. So those are 25 books that I want to read before my 25th birthday. So I have 21 months to get those read. So I do need to read them faster than one per month. So we better get cracking on reading all of those books. I am sorry for using the word interesting so many times in this video. Maybe leave me some synonyms of interesting down in the comments so I can use some better words. Maybe I need a thesaurus. But also let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books, which ones are your favourites, did you love them, did you hate them? Let me know which ones I should prioritise and make sure I read as soon as possible. We hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to see more videos, both bookish and prayer related and Bible related, all of those things from me and Arnold. Again, all of those books are going to be linked down in the description, so do go check those out if any of these appeal to you. And we will see you on Saturday for a new video. Bye!